Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Sean Young. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Classcraft. Really a pleasure to be here with you all today. We're going to be talking today about something that we've been working on for quite some time, and that is going to open up the door for a lot more stuff coming into Classcraft in the future. So there's some changes coming, and we wanted to get ahead of those as much as we could and share them before the school year ends and we all go on break and think about other things than Classcraft. But it's really a pleasure to be here with you all today. So my name is Sean. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Classcraft, and today we're going to be talking about some new features and some changes to the Classcraft experience that are coming. Before we jump into that, there's a bit of a trip down memory lane that imposes itself here, and that starts with our mission. Classcraft was founded in the classroom with the goal to motivate students and help them reach their full potential through playful, collaborative, sustainable learning experiences to promote growth, human connection. And at the core of everything we do here at Classcraft, this is what drives us. And, we know, just like everyone else, how interesting this year has been on this front. But the amount of students and teachers that have shown up this year and been there for each other, built wonderful communities, maintain the joy to learn and be together has just been astounding. And it's been a real honor to be able to be a part of that and to be a part of that with across the entire world in all corners of every country, and even in places that we would never expect. And so this is what's been driving us, and we've always wanted to be able to have Classcraft have the biggest impact possible. And that has led us on a really interesting journey. This is what Classcraft looks like, circa 2013. Some people here said they'd been with Classcraft for 7 years. So maybe you saw this version when it first existed, but this is the original prototypical version of what Classcraft looked like. When I first built it in my own classroom, and it's in French. I was teaching in French at the time, and a lot of the core mechanics that are still living in Classcraft we're present there. Lives, hit points, action points, experience points, even some of the powers have the same names as they did back then. And even then, there was something magical about Classcraft, even without avatars, even without, any proper user interface. There was something there. But then, Classcraft needed to be able to be used by other people. And so this was the very first version, the beta version of Classcraft. And our original intention was, let's make this look like a lot of the games that we love. There weren't a lot of different avatar characters, and there was an easy button to type point values. But this was the first proper clickable interface for Classcraft. And then as more and more people started using it, we tried to make the design more accessible. And this basic design has been at the core of a lot of future iterations of Classcraft. We wanted to really, share clearly how the students' avatars were evolving, and wanted to, communicate these different metrics that make the game so compelling. But at the same time, realized that this was pretty mathematical for a lot of folks, and so got into different versions of refining this from feedback from the teachers we were working with, to tests we did, etc. And this is what Classcraft looks like today. So very, if we go all the way back, very similar structure to what was there since the beginning, but always trying to refine that. And so a lot of the work that we have been doing over the last year has been about saying, well, what's the next evolution of this? where is Classcraft struggling, and where can we improve the student experience, the teacher experience, to be able to go even further. And so what we're going to be talking about today is the product of a year's worth of work, and rethinking from the ground up the experience of how to introduce Classcraft to students, what it means for them to be in this journey, how we can build a really strong foundation for a lot of the great and awesome community features that have been suggested throughout the years that we really want to get back to building, but that we've been limited in a lot of ways because of the initial design. And so, part of growing our mission, part of reaching as many kids as possible, is to make Classcraft as accessible and as easy to use as possible. And while maintaining, all the magical things that are underpinning it. And so going back to the roots of, why is this motivating? What drives kids to care so much about this experience? But at the same time, recognizing that, we work with a lot of different types of educators. And if we want to reach as many kids as possible and have the biggest impact we can, we need to make Classcraft the most accessible, easy to use experience ever. And so we set about trying to answer that question. We know that there's things we could add to Classcraft to make it even more engaging. Already seeing it here in the chat. Boss battles for students is high up at that list, individual boss battles. But we've been limited in our capacity to do that because of the way that Classcraft has been structured. And so we spent the last year, and this goes all the way back to August last year, working with teachers, doing research, working and prototyping in K-12 classrooms all over the country to understand how we could meet the needs of more teachers, but also be able to work within school systems at a broader scale. Some of the most profound impacts we've seen with Classcraft have been with school-wide and district-wide rollouts, completely changing the culture in these organizations and the way that they react and respond and work with kids. And so as you can see through our history, we've had a very strong approach of researching and developing and iterating. And that's really important. It's important to be able to meet educators where they are. But it's also important to be able to meet kids where they're at with evolving gameplay mechanics. And so starting in September, we said, okay, what is challenging for teachers when they use Classcraft? Why are people coming to Classcraft but walking away? And so we interviewed a group of teachers, got some feedback, went through a lot of the inbound feedback that we'd had over the years, and said, okay, here are some problems. The number one problem was, this is too time intensive for a teacher, or it's too complicated. So then we said, okay, well, let's see how we can simplify Classcraft to make it easier to use, easier to understand, but at the same time, give the same level of flexibility and robustness that have made Classcraft, the incredible pedagogy that it is today. And so over the next almost 2 months, we interview teachers, and we would say, okay, here's a simplified version of Classcraft. What do you think? And what would you do if you saw this screen? Where would you click? What are you understanding of the experience here? And between each of those, we built a new version of what that prototype would look like, saying, okay, well, the teacher said this, maybe we should try this, let's try it again. And so rinse and repeat was a really intense process. But we got to a place where, towards the last few prototypers saying, well, I get it. I understand what you're trying to do here, and this makes me excited to embark on the journey. And so we said, okay, now let's go test that. And so again, over another period of 6 weeks, we tested this prototypical simple version of Classcraft with almost 10 teachers with real students. We built an app for them. They clicked through it, they used it. And our goal was within 6 weeks to see if they would go on to use the full version of Classcraft. And this is interesting because, if you've been with Classcraft for a long time, it seems simple to you, but you've probably tried to get colleagues to use it, or had say, hey, maybe this would be fun with the rest of my grade band or with my school, and been met with resistance. And so what we're trying to do is get beyond that resistance, get below that resistance, and understand what are the real pain points and build that into the experience. And so the prototype that we built, 100% of the teachers that used it before the 6 weeks were up went on to say, okay, I want to use all of Classcraft. And we knew we had a winner. And the reason we needed that winner was to be able to have the buy-in from teachers that aren't necessarily gamers. We've found over the last almost decade of doing this work that we have a really amazing, beloved community of teachers that understand games and that love games. And I'm one of them myself, still playing games every day. But for Classcraft to be able to have the impact it needs to have, we need to be able to reach those teachers that aren't necessarily there with us, aren't ready yet, but that do want to reach kids, and they just need a bit of hand holding. And so we decided to say, okay, let's break down Classcraft and build a narrative journey in terms of starting the experience of Classcraft. And so this is interesting because for teachers that are new to Classcraft, what we're saying is, you can get into Classcraft as easily as possible. Anybody who's set up a Classcraft class right now, they know that there's a lot of work to set up. You got to make teams, you got to create characters, you have to get kids to log in. What if we could do all of that, but later? What if we could get kids, gaining experience points right out of the gate, before we have to do all that other stuff? And so in chapter 1, this is the simplest version of what we could boil down, but basically kids can earn experience points here. And as that happens, they unlock powers. So we went all the way back to the core of what was driving kids before even avatars became such a powerful driver. It was actually this idea of being able to control their day-to-day life. Now, our goal is to bring, our goal with everything we do with Classcraft is to bring the motivational focus from extrinsically motivating to intrinsically motivating. What that means is that, a lot of the work we do in terms of engaging with students as educators is rewarding kids, telling them, please do this thing and you will be rewarded either with good grades, with, all kinds of mechanisms we put in place, or, don't do this and you will be punished. And what we want to do is build a culture where we're celebrating kids' success. And instead of focusing on student engagement, focus on student motivation. Instead of getting them to do things, getting them to want to do things. And so it starts off, with a very simple premise of earn experience points, unlock some powers. In chapter 2, and you'll see in a second why we're calling these chapters, but in chapter 2, that's when avatars come online. So we've got a whole new set of avatar characters, new gear, new pets for this phase where kids start out their journey and now they have avatars. They start earning GP. They can get into the experience of earning their avatars. Then we bring in teams. And so from a motivational standpoint, what's happening is one of the core factors of intrinsic motivation is being in control. So at the very first, we're giving kids more control over their day-to-day life. Second piece is learning about your own progress. The avatars are a metaphor for students' competency, for their own progression as students. So we unlock that. And this is, games are really good at doing this. Then the relatedness element, bringing kids connected to each other, helping each other, team dynamics that are so rich in Classcraft, but then also doubling down on, the other two core motivators that we have built in here. So better avatars, bigger avatars, the fantastic artwork that we have, unlocking at a stronger pace here, and then better, bigger, more privileges here. And then finally in chapter 4, unlocking health points. A lot of the complexity in Classcraft we saw came from the full spectrum of mechanics. And so what we're able to do is, as teachers are using this, as they're introducing their students to it, the mechanics unlock at the pace that the teachers want. And so this is great for new teachers. It's also great for returning teachers. If we, sometimes at the beginning of the year, I use Classcraft myself for years and years and years, and I would only ever start it, towards the end of September, because I had so many things to get going at the beginning of the school year. And with this, what you can do is immediately get started, but then, have students come in later with their avatars, build this through time with them as you're explaining to them what this experience means for them as kids. And so, both a teaching moment for new teachers, but also for students, and helping students as well understand their desires and their motivations for why they care about these things. And so that experience is going to be really cool, because, if you're an experienced teacher, you can skip straight to chapter 4. Then we're not blocking any of the features, but we are saying, hey, as you're using Classcraft, start using this feature, start unlocking this feature, introduce your students to this feature. And when you're ready, move to the next chapter. And so this is going to be a way for new teachers to really be able to understand all the different mechanics. If you have a colleague that you're like, hey, you should play Classcraft with me, well, you can sit with them for 2 seconds, explain to them the overarching piece of it, but the platform will train them as they use it. What we wanted to do is bring the barrier to entry to be as low as possible, while at the same time maintaining the possibility to really be able to quickly, for new teachers, unlock the features that they love. Now, what's cool about this is that each chapter is part of a narrative. This connects back to story mode and the different storylines that exist in the quests. We have a full library of over 20 quest lines that have storylines that follow each other. But as you start with Classcraft, you'll be able to set the tone and the premise for those, to increase buy-in around the stories as students start living them in their quests. So if you follow the storyline at all, the trailer starts with a boat all the way to this, but what we're saying is, hey, we can break that down and actually have them level up through this experience. And by level up, I mean level up the classroom. And so as teachers are going and unlocking these features, we'll have just-in-time tutorials to be able to explain every little feature. It's always astounding to me. We have teachers who've been using Classcraft for years, and there are still features that they don't know about or that they don't know how to use. And so this is going to be a way for new teachers, but also existing teachers, to say, hey, I'm going to double down, unlock a new feature I've never used before, and increase my journey towards student intrinsic motivation. It's fascinating because Classcraft is in essence an approach and a platform with a whole ton of tools to help teachers use the culture, use the mechanics of games. But what that means is that there's a lot of tools, a lot to learn. Even experienced teachers don't know about all the features that are built into Classcraft quite often. And so this is a way for them to level themselves up as well. And so one of the things that really came out of the research was that giving points in Classcraft is time consuming. We've had a lot of teachers who've said, I love Classcraft, I've seen the impact, but it takes a lot of time. And so we really refocused some of our energy in terms of saying, how can I make it as simple and short as possible to do the most important thing that exists in Classcraft, which is give kids points, give them experience points. So right now, the way that Classcraft is you need to scroll through a student list, find a student, click on them, click on a button, click on a behavior, give them points. So that's, if you were keeping track, that's one long scroll, which counts as a lot of clicks, and 3 clicks. What we're saying is let's make this no scroll in 2 clicks. So go to a student, hover them, press give points, give them points, one and done. This seems like a simple change, but it's actually really transformative because the thing that motivates kids most with Classcraft, especially when starting out, is the teacher's commitment to continuously be giving them that positive feedback. And so if you're doing that 50 times a day, taking that time and dividing it by 3, which is in essence what we're seeing, is a huge game changer for those kids and for those teachers in terms of impacting motivation. Now, of course, this is simple for teachers. If you're using an interactive whiteboard, this is super simple. If you're on a mobile device, this becomes a much easier to use interface as well. So in terms of taking Classcraft outside of the classroom or with you in the classroom, this becomes a lot easier. Now, it also means that we can evolve the game dashboard as we go, because this basic version, you'll remember that in chapter 1, there is no GP, there are no HP. So you can keep the same dashboard without having those mechanics be activated. Now, that said, we know kids love the avatars and they still need to be front and center. So there's actually a profile view, which resembles a lot of the view we have now, where we can showcase the students, have them be clear on their avatar's progress. And, you're seeing it now. If you've been using Classcraft at all, you're seeing that there's some pretty big changes in the mechanics here. So yes, we have changed the names and some of the core math in Classcraft. And the reason we're doing that is because, man, when you compare these, it is just night and day in terms of how complicated one is versus the other one. And the reason we did that, so 2 things are changing within the core math. The first one is AP is becoming crystals, and the second one is that HP is becoming health. And we've redone all of the math underlying the game. Can you believe it? The math in Classcraft hasn't changed in 10 years. It took us a lot of courage to go back and say, okay, let's revisit, the core math underlying it. How can we make it simpler so that we can express what's happening in Classcraft without having numbers? And what that allows for is 2 things. First of all, less cognitive load. It's clear this person has 4 crystals. And, it's clear that the max is 6 as opposed to 43 out of 50 and all these different mechanics that we have. Also allows us to work with younger kids. While not being kid-like, the math is simpler and easier to understand for younger grades. Now, for teachers, this is awesome because you can at a glance see what's happening here. We realized, and maybe this is obvious, but we realized, that wow, HP, AP, XP, GP, while those are all consistent, it also makes talking about it pretty confusing. And unless you're really well versed in Classcraft, the difference between XP and AP and GP isn't necessarily obvious. So having an iconography that matches that, having a simple mathless system that allows you to at a glance understand what's happening, really powerful stuff. Now, what that allows for is really awesome one-to-one mechanics as well, right? So, powers now cost 1, 2, or 3 crystals. 1 power costs 1 crystal. Makes sense, right? Behaviors, instead of taking off, 3 HP, 7 HP, 8 HP, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hearts. And so makes it very simple to understand what these powers do and also how much they cost at a glance right out of the interface instead of having to click into them and memorize all of these powers. And so that's pretty fascinating stuff, just how simple this is. And even for existing Classcraft users that have been with us for a long time, I know for myself, I've been looking at these bars for a decade, and this feels much easier to understand at a glance. And we know that, when you're in a classroom, you need to be able to see this stuff, see it fast, not sit down and try to parse out some math. So that's changing. Now, this one is interesting because for our more advanced teachers, this has been a serious limitation in terms of how you can configure and customize Classcraft. Right now, the way Classcraft works, you have 3 character classes, and for each of those character classes, you have 9 powers in a skill tree, and no more, no less than 9 powers. And the reason it's structured like that is because it's really hard to create an interface that's simple to use, that doesn't break the mechanics, to create these types of trees. For years and years and years, teachers have been asking to be able to modify this, and it's always been, well, this is really complicated to do. But we went back to the drawing board, and one thing we realized was there are a couple of challenges with this. The first one is the limitation in terms of number. The second one is that there was a hidden mechanic here. There was this hand and number of hands, and there's nowhere else that this is obvious in the game. And so we've been able to revisit that. And ultimately, for teachers that are starting out or that are using this across their school, having 27 powers, and the fact that kids you could be level 6 and have this power, or you could be level 6 and have these 4 powers. It meant that at any given time, from the beginning, a teacher needs to know all the powers in the game. So it's 27 privileges. You need to map back to their names and memorize the privileges. It's just too much. And so we went back to the drawing board, rethought this, and borrowed from some of the most iconic games of our time, to rebuild this progression track. So this is exactly how Fortnite works in terms of rewarding level ups. And what this allows is for some really cool stuff. The first thing is now, you unlock a power at any given level. So for teachers, this is a lot easier because it's like, hey, if I have a level 5 student, they're the highest level. Well, I know it's these 3 powers that are unlocked, not, this variety that I need to memorize. The second thing this allowed us to do was there's a lot of progression happening in Classcraft that is not explicit to students, and thus we're losing this capacity to motivate them. It's not clear for kids which gear they're unlocking at which level, in which order. Now we're able to outlay it along here with their powers that they earn. Now, of course, we're not limited on a line like this, so it's going to be possible to add in new powers, go beyond the 27 base, or take some out if you don't like them. Also means that before we were limited because of this tree to, you needed 18 levels to get all of these powers. And so max level was level 18. And that was limiting, especially as you get towards the end of the year. I'm seeing here in the chat, and people saying, well, my students are going to be level 18 soon. It's going to be great because we're at the end of the year. But what that means is 40 weeks of school. Best students are level 18. Most kids are leveling up once every 2 or 3 weeks. We redid all the math and spaced out the privileges and the gears so that students would be able to level up every single week. We know that the feeling of progression, the feeling of moving forward is really critical to student motivation. And that happens when students are leveling up and unlocking things. And so by having this more flexible system, we're able to make that happen more often and make it more customizable. Also means that teachers can now see what the rewards are. This track allows teachers to be able to jump in and see immediately what's coming on the track for students. And so there's a lot coming here that is really going to allow us to do a lot of things. And I'll talk about those things in a second, but one thing that's coming as a result is the possibility to have more gear, have more pets, have more power icons, have teachers be able to create new powers. And so build in new structures to earn more gear that aren't necessarily just tied to gear sets throughout the year. So you can look forward to next year being full of new IP and new characters and new pets as a result of this mechanism that the reward track gives us. Now, the our goal is to launch this in July. We are telling you now because, first of all, it allows us to start creating help articles, explaining the changes, explaining exactly how the migration path is going to work. We're going to turn it on in July, and you'll be able to transition to the new version when you're ready. This is a super exciting time for Classcraft because a lot of the things we've wanted to make have been limited by the structure that we've had in terms of the necessity, for example, for teams, student accounts, student avatars to be created before we could start giving them points. Now we can imagine systems where kids can start getting points automatically from third-party platforms immediately without having to do all of this extra work to get it set up right away. We can imagine more robust integrations with digital platforms. We can imagine the capacity to connect more tools into Classcraft to save more time for teachers, but also increase engagement around other tools. Now, what's awesome here as well is that this allows us to have a really robust stepping stone in terms of bringing new engagement features into the platform as well. So this is the first step of a new journey for Classcraft in terms of our capacity to respond to now that we've done a lot of the work that we needed to do to in terms of rostering, in terms of data reporting for school and district customers, we're now able to focus back on the student experience and the teacher experience and really make that shine. And so we're really excited to be doing that and to be able to release this during the summer so that no surprises when you come back. Now, this has been pretty high level in terms of why we did this, how we're seeing this, what's next for Classcraft. If you're an existing teacher and you really want to dive into, well, how do these mechanics work? What's going to happen with my existing classes? What about if I'm using this during the summer? How can I transition my students into, the new experience? How does this impact, the quests I've already created, for example? These are all things that we'll be able to dive in really deeply on these deep dive webinars. We're going to start doing one every week starting next week for the next 6 weeks. And if you miss them, it's no problem. We're going to take the best one, record it, and put it online so you can watch it at your own leisure over the summer. But basically, we're going to be getting into a lot of the more fine-tuned details of what this all implies in those webinars. That said, the end of this year and next school year are going to be really critical times for kids, and we're starting to see it already as kids return to the classroom. The mental health challenges, the motivational challenges, the social emotional learning challenges that we've had that we've developed over the past year of uncertainty are coming to full force as we come back to the classroom, and so we're really excited about the capacity and the possibility that we now have to work with you and work with all these wonderful little human beings to help them transition back into the new normal of what school is going to look like. It's been a tough year for teachers. You're all extremely tired, but we're really, really grateful for the work you've done going above and beyond and adapting Classcraft to your virtual environments, but also being there for your kids and helping them stay engaged with school. Really excited about the what this allows for Classcraft's journey. And we hope you are too, because the truth is that this opens up the gate for a lot of really exciting things. So maybe we'll have some smaller reveals in the future that you can look forward to. Speaking of coming back to the classroom, if you want to hear about mental health, social emotional learning, we're doing a webinar in 2 weeks with Dr. Denise Zimmerman. She's director of mental health, who just retired, and we'll be talking about what we're seeing as challenges for mental health and how you can use social emotional learning, motivation, and Classcraft to be able to address those issues. So thank you so much. We're really excited to engage with you in any way that we can online. And we've had some super fun experiences this week on TikTok, but we're present on all the social media that you care about, probably. And we're going to be posting more news and more sneak peeks and more information about everything that's coming on those channels. So if you want to stay connected, please follow there. We're going to be able to take a few questions. We have a few minutes here, but if you have any specific questions, please feel free to jump into our future deep dive webinars. And thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. So I haven't looked at all the chat here. There is one question that has come up about individual boss battles. Is that on the horizon? We are aware that this is a very requested feature. So the short answer is no, not before this releases, but it's definitely a high candidate in terms of upcoming roadmap. There's some questions about here about social emotional learning. So the question here is, can we connect Classcraft to social emotional learning? Absolutely. In fact, we have just created a social and emotional learning curriculum built into Quests that is available for schools and districts. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. We also have ready-made CASEL aligned, social emotional aligned templates for Classcraft for behavior that tie back to CASEL or other SEL frameworks. So if you're interested in that, this is definitely a good place to start. There's a question about re-engaging with students and having teachers with having students in multiple chapters. So we've designed it so that even if you're in a school and you have students that are in chapter 1 in one class and chapter 4 in another class, it works seamlessly. So if you're an advanced teacher and you're saying, hey, you know what, I'm going straight to chapter 4, I want the full bells and whistles, but your colleague is still learning, still coming on board, they can be in chapter 1. And the students can still have their same avatar across both classes. There's a question here about will we be doing a French webinar? So I'll just switch to French here for a second. We have a lot of people using Classcraft in French. Donc oui, on va faire un webinaire en français pour le Québec. Ça s'en vient dans probablement la semaine prochaine ou l'autre d'après. Puis on va présenter le même contenu, mais évidemment dans la langue de Molière. Donc on vous invite à garder une oreille attentive là-dessus, mais ça s'en vient. There's a question here about integration with LMSs. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but there are other announcements coming in regards to that. So stay tuned in terms of Classcraft connecting to other LMSs. I think you'll be pretty pleased by some other announcements we have coming soon. a question about grading assignments directly in Classcraft. And that is possible already in Quests. If students create their assignment and hand it in directly in the WYSIWYG through Quest, they're going to be able to do that and continue. You can give them feedback right there. You can, if it's a PDF, you can also view it right in your browser. There's a question about Google Classroom. We are still integrated with Google Classroom, and we're committed to making the integration with Google seamless across this new rollout. So that nothing should change there. You'll be able to pull in assignments from Google Classroom, give kids points, roster if you're a single teacher from Google Classroom, have students use the single sign-on features. All of that is part of the new experience. There's a question. This is really great. Are there new boss battle bosses? So yes, actually, we just launched some in the last month in the game that they're new. We didn't really announce them, but they're part of the game already. The follow-up question is, will the new bosses look like Andrew Hutchison? We all love Hutch. So maybe we should do that. I'm sure he would get a kick out of it. There's some more questions here that are in the details about things coming to the teacher accounts. I'll let those questions hold for now, just because we're coming on time. But really, again, thank you for coming. Really appreciate your time here, and look forward to working together on this new version and this new journey for Classcraft. There's a lot of exciting things to come. So thank you very much. And again, good luck for the end of this school year. I can only, from my own experience as an educator to other educators, can only imagine how tired you must all be and ready for the school year to end. So you'll have definitely earned your summer vacation this year. So thank you for all the work you're doing.